The non-aggression pact that Stalin agreed to sign with Hitler had caused the division of Poland. The country caught the attention of Hitler and Stalin due to the access of Baltic Sea that the Allies gave Poland. Hitler prepared a technique that was first used in attacking the country. It was called the Blitzkrieg. Using Germany's massive infantry, fast-moving tanks, and airplanes, the invasion became easy for Hitler. Unaware and unprepared for the attack, Poland quickly gave in its western part. The Allies declared war against Germany for invading Denmark and Norway, which are neutral countries. Lightning War was one of the most significant events in the European theater for using combined land and air forces in fighting.
After France surrendered to Germany, Hitler, the German dictator, turned his attention to Britain. But British Prime Minister Winston Churchill declared that his nation would never give in. Some strategies that Hitler thought will make British surrender is by defeating the Royal Air Force and by bombing large cities, including London. Germany Air Force, also known as the Luftwaffe, bombed the British for 8 months. The British survived by hiding in the subways, bomb shelters, and basements. They were also sent out of the countries. There are two devices that helped the British to win the war. One is their radar, which told them the number of speed and direction of incoming warplanes. And the other one is the Enigma, which enabled them to reveal German secret messages. These devices helped them to gather information and to quickly attack on the enemy. Hitler gave up and was stunned by British persistence. After that, he just focused on the Mediterranean and Eastern Europe instead. The Battle of Britain had shown the Allies that appeasement was not the only solution to prevent war from happening. It awakened them that they have to fight back and not to give up easily. The Battle of Bulge began in 1944 when Hitler launched a surprise attack on Allied forces in southern Belgium and Luxembourg. The goal of the Allied forces under General Eisenhower was to defend road junctions and destroy bridges and gasoline Germans needed for their advance. Throughout the Battle of the Bulge, soldiers fought in terrible winter conditions. Many soldiers suffered from frostbite or even froze to death. Hitler hoped a victory would split the Allied supply between Americans and British, but unfortunately, he did not succeed. As the Allied forces called more reinforcement for superior tanks and artillery, as well as new infantry troops, the German army began to call their operation a fail. The battle is significant in the course of World War II because it is seen as Hitler's last major attack in the war. While the battle was intended to split Allied lines and force negotiated peace, American forces were able to contain the battle and inflict heavier losses on the German forces. Nazi Germany invaded Soviet Union in 1941 under the codename Barbarossa. German forces the Soviet Union less than 2 years after the German-Soviet Pact was signed. Soviet was surprised and not ready for war, so they decided to apply the scorched earth policy. Russians suffered more than any countries during World War II. Hitler tried to starve Russians, so Russians had no choice but to eat what they only have, like dogs, crows, and rats to survive. Hitler also tried to attack Moscow, the capital of the Soviet Union, but they did not succeed as temperature fell. The Germans in summer uniform retreated and lost about 500,000 lives. At the end, Soviets still lose some territories, which made German domination of Europe reach its furthest geographical extension. One person that will never be forgotten, not just in British history, but also in world history, is Winston Churchill. He was the Prime Minister in Britain and was known as one of the best leaders during World War II. Churchill also grew up to become one of the greatest speakers of all time. He established the Royal Naval Air Service, modernized the British fleet, and invented one of the earliest tanks. He is an important person during World War II because he stood up alone against Nazis. And he also contributed a lot not just to his own country, but also to the countries that participated during the World War II. He taught the Allies that they do not have to give in easily, that they got to fight as long as they can. He is also known with his famous quotes:
We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall fight in the hills, we shall never surrender.
Japan's economy resources dropped after the war against northeastern China. Knowing that European colonies gained territories, Japan advanced towards European colonies in Southeast Asia for its import market. The United States knew about Japan's intention and stopped trading its oil with it, which caused a spark war between both countries. The United States thought that Japan will attack their closest colony. What it did not know was Japan will attack the colony close to home, where most of the naval facilities were. Losing 18 American ships and 800 airplanes, the United States with its Pacific Fleet carriers returned to the mainland. Pacific Fleet's facilities helped the United States to get back from the war. The United States was not able to avoid the Second World War after Japan's allies Germany and Italy attacked. This event was considered by President Roosevelt as a day that will live in infamy. It is very significant because this event dragged the United States in World War II. Also, this event have shown how the United States fought the war alone without the help of its allies.
Only 6 months after the attack of the Pearl Harbor, the Battle of Midway occurred. Both Japan and US have their own strategies. Americans' plan is to crash all the planes and aircraft carriers that are Japanese using for the war. Early morning on June 4th, aircraft from 4 Japanese aircraft carriers attacked and severely damaged the US base on Midway. This was the signal that the war has begun. Both sides were attacking fiercely, but as the Japanese was attacking the US navies, the Americans were fighting back as what they planned. They successfully destroyed all 4 aircraft carriers, one support ship, and hundreds of planes that Japanese used. The plan was a success, but it's not just the Japanese who lost men, carriers, and planes. United States also lost one carrier, the USS Yorktown, one destroyer, and hundreds of aircraft. The Battle of Midway proved that the US Navy don't keep up easily and could match the scheme of the Japanese. The battle also stopped the Japanese from advancing and lowered their morale.
After Japan's loss from Pearl Harbor, it decided to move and expand across the Pacific Ocean. General MacArthur planned to island hop and seize Japanese territories to get to Japan. The United States found out that Japan was trying to build air base in Guadalcanal that will open the invasion in New Zealand and Australia. General MacArthur later decided to invade Guadalcanal and establish the American air base called Henderson to prevent Japan from having another stronghold. United States Marine Air Force defended the island and made Japan withdraw from the island referred to as Hell. This event was very significant because it was the first battle to free the Pacific from colonization of Japan. 2 months after the Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt ordered to put the Japanese American citizens in internment camps for national security. Japanese American soldiers worried about their relatives behind wars. To prove their loyalty to the United States, Japanese farmers worked and were paid depending on the amount of work they have done. Due to the stress and lack of medical assistance, many Japanese Americans died. This incident made Japanese American soldiers to be more inspired to fight and prove their loyalty to the United States of America. The relocation of Japanese Americans was considered as one of the most flagrant violations of civil liberties in American history. What made this event very significant to the Pacific Theater was the loyalty that every Japanese Americans showed the United States, considering that they were suspected to sabotage the country.
General Douglas MacArthur is a successful American military and named as Commander of U.S. Army Forces. He graduated at the top of his class from the U.S. Military Academy at the age of 23. Also, he is one of the most important persons during World War II in the Pacific Theater. Douglas was commanded to lead the soldiers in Pearl Harbor when Japan attacked them unexpectedly. But when they started to fight back, they successfully win the war in his lead. MacArthur was commanded to help the Philippines organize their military when Japan started to invade them. When he was ordered by President Roosevelt to come back to the United States, he left his famous line, "I shall return." General Douglas MacArthur is a significant person during World War II because he led the U.S. Philippine forces to stop Japan from expanding territories in the Pacific.
From wanting more natural resources to desiring to gain more territories and expanding its colonies, Japanese finally surrendered. MacArthur's plan of island hopping worked when they finally captured Iwo Jima and Okinawa Island. Japan built bunkers and dug tunnels, but the Allied forces urged them to retreat. Japanese rather risk their life or commit suicide than being taken as prisoners. These soldiers were called kamikaze. As the United States finally reached Japan, President Truman had warned the country to drop the atomic bomb and said that they should expect a rain of ruin from the air. Receiving no response from Japan, Truman bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Though many of the Allied soldiers died, Japanese casualties were huge in numbers. The victory in the Pacific will always be a significant event in history because of the use of the atomic bombs in order to save many lives. The Allied victory was a sign that the war has finally ended.